Some say this lonely old church was abandoned by God himself. Locals speak of black masses, of candles flickering in the darkness, and ghostly figures seen amongst the gravestones. Some call it the Devil's Church. And as Halloween draws nearer, we're here to learn about whether the veil between unholy ground and haunted ruin does indeed become thinner. This, my spooky friends, is the season of the dead, a journey through Britain's darkest places, as All Hallows Eve draws near, and the veil between the living and the dead trembles. Hello friends, and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I'm Claire, this is The Wanderlust Way. Firstly, let me say a huge thank you to everybody that supports this channel by liking, subscribing, commenting, sharing. Honestly, everything that you guys are doing is helping this channel to grow, and it's allowing me to continue with these videos, exploring the places and sharing the stories that I find with you. Okay, so today it is the start of a very special series called Season of the Dead, where each week from now until Halloween, I will be releasing a new video. In this series, we will be exploring some of Britain's darkest places, haunted ruins. We will be sharing myths, legends, and some of the stories that share why this is a time when the veil between the living and the dead may become thinner. But first, a warning, this series is not for the faint-hearted. It may have you asking questions that you've not considered before. And we begin here, in the desolate Lincolnshire countryside at the abandoned church of St Botolph in Skidbrooke. Known to locals as the Devil's Church, this ruin has become infamous for tales of satanic worship and ghostly apparitions. The reality of this place is that it forces us to face that old age idea, good versus evil, and perhaps some of us to even question when our own time comes, will it be heaven or hell? It's a story that has played out on countless stages, across religions, nations and time itself. A fear so deeply rooted that it inspired one of the greatest horror films ever made, The Exorcist. And so, my friends, this is why we are here at this old, lonely church in Lincolnshire, where the battle of good versus evil is still said to play out. So if you're ready for this spooky story, maybe grab yourself a pillow to hide behind. That's enough waffle. Let's wander. Out here, the landscape is vast and empty. Fields stretch away into the horizon, broken only by a lonely tractor or the cries of distant birds. Few travellers pass this way, and those who do often speak of the strange hush that seems to settle over Skidbrooke once the road gives way to fields. It is a place where silence weighs heavy, where the air itself feels damp with secrets. And rising from this desolation stands the ruined shell of St Botolph's church. Its walls have weathered centuries of storms, yet inside lies only emptiness. No hymns, no prayers, no congregation. The Diocese of Lincoln declared the church redundant in 1973, and since then it has stood abandoned, a holy relic of faith slowly surrendering to time. Today it is cared for by the church's Conservation Trust, though what they preserve is not a place of worship, but an echo, a memory. The irony is not lost on those who know their saints. This church was dedicated to St Botolph, the patron of boundaries and travellers. Once his name was a blessing for those who walked lonely paths or crossed uncertain thresholds. Yet here, his house has become something else entirely, a place of darkness, where the boundary between worlds feels perilously thin. Today we are about 7 miles northeast of Louth, not far from the east coast. We're here in the village of Skidbrooke to, of course, visit the church. Now, this church was built in the 13th century with lots of bits added on later on, as is so often the case with churches like this. It has, of course, been abandoned. It has been given a Grade 1 listing.
However, many people believe this church is cursed.
It was during the 1970s and 80s that this place earned the name that clings to it still, the Devil's Church. With its doors long closed to worship, the ruin became a magnet for the curious and for those who sought something darker. By day, it stood like any other abandoned church, weathered stone, empty windows, a skeleton of faith. But by night, evidence told a different story. Pentagrams scrawled onto the walls, wax pooled across the flagstones, candles guttered in the shadows long after midnight. On more than one occasion, the remains of sacrificed animals were discovered here. Chickens, sometimes a sheep, their blood staining the stones where prayers had once been spoken. Local newspapers documented the unease. Visitors spoke of strange lights flickering through the windows when no one was inside. Some reported hearing footsteps crunch across the church floor, even though the building stood empty. Others whispered of a hooded monk gliding silently between the pews, or the eerie sound of phantom storms rolling overhead on nights when the sky was perfectly calm.
The stories spread quickly and fear soon grew amongst the community. The desecration of this place became so concerning that many locals wanted to have it torn down, as if pulling down the church would get rid of some of the darkness.
For centuries, churches like this stood as sanctuaries, places of light, safety and prayer. But here at Skidbrooke, the sanctuary has been overturned, and when faith retreats, fear often moves in.
Now, this place has, of course, attracted a lot of attention over the years. There's been historians, curious people like myself, and even the ghost hunters and paranormal researchers who have come here to find out what they can actually uncover.
One investigation reported a heavy, oppressive atmosphere that seemed to push people to leave. Others have described strange flashes of light in the sky, even when the weather was calm.
There are lots of claims that people have experienced things while they've been here, but one of the ones that is probably one of the most disturbing is that in 2004 a parapsychologist came here and they reported the figure of ghostly babies seen darting amongst the gravestones. Now that is quite chilling, I think you'll agree, and it's possibly one of the reasons why this site has since become known as one of the most haunted in Lincolnshire. But the question is, does sometimes the amount of attention a place attracts cause the energy to make it feel more haunted?
Locals say that after the media reports, night after night, people descended here to light candles, perform animal sacrifices and test its power. Does all that human energy feed into the stories, giving the church more strength, making it more susceptible to darker entities? Or, just as we saw in the days of the witch trials, can fear and belief snowball into something like mass hysteria until the legends take on a life of their own?
For many people who do believe, though, Skidbrooke is more than just an abandoned ruin with a reputation. Some say that this place speaks to the power of the devil himself, ultimate evil that has terrorised humanity's imagination for centuries. Why do places like this unsettle us so deeply? Is it the thought that when faith moves out, evil has the opportunity to seize the stage? Because if you believe in goodness and light, then you, by the same logical concept, you must also believe in its opposite, in the power of evil.
For centuries, we have given evil 1,000 names. Satan, Lucifer, the Prince of Darkness, the Antichrist. Call him what you will, he is always the adversary. In the Bible, the devil is portrayed as the great tempter, offering Christ everything he could desire if only he would bow to him. It's a story that shows Satan's true method, not brute force but temptation. And that is how many people believe he still works today. Not with fire and brimstone, but with whispers, the lure of power, the promise of wealth, the indulgence of desires we know we should not give in to. The devil doesn't need to possess us to claim us. All he needs is for us to give in, one temptation at a time.
And possession is his most terrifying victory. In the past, entire communities have been thrown into hysteria by the idea that a devil has claimed one of its own.
In 17th century France, the nuns of Loudun convulsed in their convent, spoke in tongues, and named Father Urbain Grandier as their tormentor. His enemies seized the chance. He was tried, condemned, and burned alive before thousands, while the so-called demons continued to dance in the cloisters long after his ashes were scattered.
3 centuries later, a boy by the name of Roland Doe would fall victim to torments that no one could explain.
Furniture crashed, his skin bore words carved by unseen claws, and his voice twisted into guttural languages he had never learnt. It had all started, we are told, with the use of a Ouija board. After weeks of violent exorcisms, the ordeal ended, but not before it inspired a tale that would terrify the world: The Exorcist. When that story reached the silver screen in 1973, audiences fainted in the aisles and fled from theatres in panic. It was not the pea soup or the special effects that horrified them. It was the notion that evil could walk into any ordinary home, take hold of any child, and refuse to let go.
The Exorcist has become one of the most famous horror movies of all time. But let me ask you this. What did you first think when you saw it? Did it terrify you, and why? Why did it terrify you?
Whilst the subject of demonic possession is on our lips, make no mistake, these beliefs persist. Out of respect, I will not speak of the living who still claim to have faced such things, but know this: every year in Rome, the Vatican hosts its course on exorcism and the prayer of liberation. Since 2005, hundreds of priests from around the globe have gathered to study the devil's work, to learn how to unmask possession and to perform the ancient rites of expulsion. In Italy alone, more than 500,000 people request exorcisms each year. The Pope himself has reminded his flock that the devil is real and that his influence is not to be dismissed. But this fear is not the property of Christianity alone. Every culture has told the same story in its own tongue. In Egypt, the sun god Ra was said to sail each night through the underworld, locked in combat with demons. In West Africa, masked dancers summon the spirits of their ancestors to drive away evil forces. In every age, the world of the living has imagined the realm of the dead, and at its heart, always, lies the struggle between light and shadow.
Perhaps that is the reason why the devil persists, not just in our pulpits, in our stories, in our folklore, in our films, but because the devil is the face of the fear that never leaves us.
And so we circle back to this lonely ruin in the Lincolnshire countryside. For some, it is simply an empty church battered by time. For others, it is a stage in that endless drama of good versus evil. But whether or not you believe in demons, one truth remains. As the season of the dead approaches, when the nights lengthen and the veil grows fragile, the devil is never far from the story.
It's really easy to forget if you're not careful, because you could get caught up in all the stories and everything, that this isn't just an abandoned church. It is the final resting place for many people. And although some of these graves are tremendously old and the names have been battered by the rain, we've even got some Commonwealth war graves here as well. Sailors laid to rest, they do not know their names. But these people are the ones keeping the vigil over this place. So before we start talking about stories of devils and darkness, let's not forget that the dead deserve our respect first.
There was a time when buildings like this were the pulse of a village. Sundays were measured in hymns, life's milestones, christenings, vows, farewells were set beneath a steeple, and death was met with ritual and prayer.
Now, at one time, Britain was filled with churches like this, and every Sunday, most people would go. They would worship, weddings, christenings, funerals, everything would happen at the church. Fast forward to this modern times, and you've got less than 5% of people, a survey said, that are now attending church on a regular basis, on a weekly basis. Most of those funerals and weddings, they're happening in other places, crematoriums, swanky hotels. So there's less use for buildings like this. There's less faith, that's for sure. But the question is, when faith moves out, does it leave space for something darker to move in?
I'm not here to tell anyone what to believe. I'm here to listen and to wonder. In a world more certain of science than of saints, how do we meet death? With statistics or with stories? With silence or with song? If fewer people dread the devil, does it change how we live, or only how we explain what we've done? Tell me what you think. If faith has waned for you, has something else taken its place? If you still keep the old rites, what do they give you that nothing else can? Because here, among the graves and the broken windows, we stand between memory and oblivion. And as the season of the dead draws near, that question feels closer than ever.
And so concludes our very first episode in this season of The Dead. Thank you to everybody for watching. Thank you to Skidbrooke Church for being here and for having us ask lots of questions about the balance between good and evil. We do, of course, leave this place with the utmost respect for those that finally rest here. Now, next week, we are once again going to be approaching another dark question. This time is what happens when the dead refuse to stay buried? I've been Claire. This has been The Wanderlust Way. Stay safe, stay curious, and don't have nightmares.